The transmission flickered on the screen, a message sent across all frequencies, penetrating Earth's most secure networks, delivered with cold precision. The image was sharp and looming, an imposing figure framed by a backdrop of stars, his form too large to fit on the screen. He was Admiral Varnock, leader of the Galactic Council's fleet. His voice was a growl, as if it had traveled across light years to reach them, carrying the weight of an ancient civilization's disdain. "People of Earth," Varnock's voice echoed, "the Galactic Council has grown tired of your insolence. For centuries, you have clung to your primitive existence, barely scratching the surface of your potential. Now, the time has come for you to recognize your place in the galaxy." His tone softened, veiling a threat. "You will submit tribute. 100,000 tons of your resources, in 5 days. Fail, and Earth will be wiped from existence." The transmission cut off as abruptly as it had begun. Mara Stryker, commander of Earth's first interstellar defense fleet, stood at the head of the briefing room, her expression cold. The rest of the room fell silent, eyes on her. Her uniform, meticulously pressed and devoid of any adornments, made her seem almost unnaturally composed for the moment. But beneath her calm demeanor, her mind raced. "Impossible," murmured Lieutenant Rhea, a young officer who stood near the back. Rhea was lean, with fiery red hair that she wore pulled back into a tight ponytail, and a look in her eyes that mirrored her disbelief. "They're asking for everything we have. This isn't just about resources, it's a statement." "Exactly," Mara replied, voice low but firm. "They've tested us for years, watching as we develop technology faster than they expected. Now they see us as a threat." She turned to face the crew, her gaze sharpening. "We have 5 days to decide. Surrender means survival, but for how long? Are we going to roll over and let them dictate our fate? Or do we stand and fight?" A murmur ran through the room. Some faces were stoic, others worried. Humanity had always feared the unknown, especially the alien. They weren't prepared for this. Yet, standing in the room, Mara could sense the swell of defiance. No one on Earth had ever bowed down without a fight. Rhea stepped forward. "We don't even know the full scope of their power. Their ships, they're massive. And their technology, far beyond what we've seen. If we fight, we risk it all." Mara held Rhea's gaze, her voice unwavering. "Then we take that risk. We're not submitting to anyone. Not now. Not ever." The room fell silent, and for a moment, the weight of the decision hung in the air. Earth had always been a small player on the galactic stage, a forgotten speck among ancient, advanced races. Now, it was on the brink of a galactic conflict. "But," Rhea continued, her voice laced with concern, "if we do this, we need to be prepared for what comes next. We don't even know if our ships can withstand their assault." Mara nodded. "That's why we're not going to fight them with brute force alone. We'll use what we've learned, our tech, our strategies. The enemy underestimates us because they think we're still a young, untested species. We're going to show them exactly what humanity is capable of." A sharp beeping sound cut through the tension. Rhea tapped her console and looked at the new data streaming in. The Galactic Council wasn't waiting. "There's more," Rhea said, a frown deepening on her brow. "They've already mobilized a fleet. Their flagship is en route. It's not just a warning now, it's a declaration of war." Mara turned to the window, gazing out at the distant stars. Earth had always been a planet of survivors, but now, humanity was on the verge of something far greater. This wasn't about defending a world, it was about proving humanity's place in the galaxy. "Get the fleet ready," Mara ordered, her voice steady. "We're about to show them that we won't be anyone's puppet." The crew jumped into action, though none of them knew what would come next. They were entering uncharted territory, where the stakes were higher than any battle they had fought before. And it wasn't just Earth that hung in the balance. It was the future of humanity. As Mara strode out of the briefing room, she felt the weight of her decision press against her chest. There was no going back. Earth's fate had been sealed in that moment, and the only choice left was how they would meet it. Mara stood at the command center, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the console, feeling the weight of the decision settle deeper into her bones. The countdown had already begun. 5 days until the Council's deadline. 5 days to make a choice that could either spark the greatest war Earth had ever known, or cower beneath the boot of an alien empire. Her eyes scanned the holomap projected in front of her, showing Earth's orbital defenses in tight formation. The fleet was ready, but the odds were not in their favor. The Galactic Council had already mobilized an overwhelming armada. There was no mistaking the scale of the threat. "You're thinking about it again," Rhea said, stepping into the room. She had that same look on her face, one of quiet determination, and Mara knew Rhea had been losing sleep over the same questions. "How can I not think about it?" Mara replied, her voice tight. "We're facing an entire fleet of ships far more advanced than our own. If we don't do something now, we'll be wiped out before we even get the chance to fight back." Rhea placed a hand on the console, her gaze steady as it met Mara's. "Then we fight. We show them that we're not weak. That we're not like the others they've conquered." Mara met her lieutenant's eyes and nodded, her mind running calculations. She turned back to the map. "The key isn't fighting them head-on. They expect that. No, our advantage is in speed, in surprise. We hit them before they can retaliate. It's our only chance." Rhea's brow furrowed slightly. "You want us to strike first?" "Exactly," Mara replied, her fingers moving quickly over the console as she zoomed in on the coordinates of the closest Council outpost. It was a barren moon on the outskirts of their sector, under constant surveillance but lightly defended. "We hit them hard, cripple their communications, and disrupt their supply lines. If we can take down their communications, we'll buy ourselves precious time." Rhea studied the plan, then looked up at Mara, her resolve hardening. "I'll gather the team. But Mara, this isn't just a skirmish. If we do this, we'll be initiating full-scale war. The Council won't let us go after them again." "I know." The weight of that truth pressed down on Mara's shoulders. "That's why we need to be ready for whatever comes next." The briefing room hummed with nervous energy as the officers gathered around the table. Mara stepped forward, her presence commanding immediate attention. Behind her, a wall of screens displayed intel on the Council's fleet and the target outpost. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this," Mara began, her voice crisp. "We're attacking their forward base. It's lightly guarded, but don't mistake that for an advantage. The moment we engage, the Council will know we're serious. They'll retaliate, and they'll do so with everything they've got." The officers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke up to challenge her. They understood the stakes, the risks. This was a mission that would decide whether humanity stood or fell. "Lieutenant Rhea," Mara continued, turning to her. "You're in charge of the tactical operation. I want you to take the lead on this one. Get our best pilots in the air, and make sure the squadron stays tight. No room for error." Rhea nodded. "Understood, Captain." Mara took a deep breath and glanced around the room. "The Council will try to hit us where it hurts once they realize what we're doing. We need to prepare for a counterattack, and we need to be fast. This is a one-shot opportunity. If we fail, Earth might never recover." The officers nodded solemnly, understanding that Mara was asking them to risk everything. The mission was dangerous, not just for the fleet, but for Earth itself. "Let's move, people," Mara said, her voice hard as steel. "We fight now or we die later. Either way, we're making sure the galaxy knows humanity's name." The fleet was silent as it made its way to the Council's outpost. Ships glided through the cold expanse of space, the stars distant and indifferent to the human struggle unfolding beneath them. The tension among the crew was palpable, a mixture of fear and adrenaline that rippled through every deck of the flagship. The crew knew what was at stake. Rhea paced through the war room, running through the details of the mission again and again. Their first wave would be a diversion, drawing the enemy's attention while a smaller group snuck behind the outpost to disable its communications. It had to be precise. One misstep, and the entire mission could fail. Lieutenant, came the voice of Commander Larkin, her eyes sharp with concern. Are you sure about this? We're not just risking a skirmish here. If we engage, we'll be bringing down the full wrath of their fleet. Rhea didn't flinch. She turned toward Larkin, her expression resolute. If we don't do this, they'll come for us anyway. Better to take the first punch. The stars beyond the observation window were like silent witnesses as the countdown to launch began. Mara stood alone on the command deck, her fingers clasped behind her back. She stared into the infinite abyss of space, her mind grappling with the weight of their decision. Rhea's strategy had been calculated, precise. But even with their advantage in speed, there was no telling what the Council would throw at them once they realized the humans had struck first. Captain, came Rhea's voice, calm but firm. We're ready to engage. Mara turned, meeting Rhea's gaze. Then let's show them what it means to mess with humanity. The countdown was complete. With a final nod, Mara gave the order. Engage. As the ships tore toward the Council's outpost, the tension in the air was unbearable. Rhea's voice came over the comms, each word sharp and purposeful. The first wave was launched, followed closely by the small strike team sent to disable the communications center. The moment their ships entered the outpost's atmosphere, alarms blared. The Council knew they were coming. And so, the battle for Earth began. The hum of the engines reverberated through the flagship, an eerie calm that only heightened the tension in the air. The fleet was deep in enemy territory now, and every passing moment seemed to stretch, each one loaded with the crushing weight of what was about to unfold. The first wave of fighters had breached the Council's defenses and begun their diversionary strikes. Now, it was time for the real mission. Mara Stryker stood in front of the command console, her eyes fixed on the cluster of ships scattered across the tactical map. Earth's fleet was small, but they had the element of surprise. That, and the sheer will to fight that had been ingrained in every soldier since birth. Humanity wasn't just defending a planet, they were defending the very idea that they had a place in the stars. All systems go, Captain, Rhea's voice broke through Mara's thoughts. We're ready to launch the strike team. Mara turned to face Rhea, whose face was bathed in the dim red light of the command center. What's the status of the first wave? She asked, her voice steady but carrying the urgency of the situation. Rhea checked her screen and responded, the distraction is working. Their defenses are fragmented, but we've made contact with their communication relay. Once we hit it, they'll be blind. Good, Mara said, nodding. Give the order to proceed. We don't have much time before they adapt. As Rhea moved to relay the orders, Mara's mind raced. She knew the risks they were taking. The Council was ruthless, and if they failed here, Earth would be swarmed by reinforcements, too many to stop. The weight of her decision, of her command, pressed down harder with each passing second. But she had made her choice. It was too late to turn back now. Outside the flagship, the vast emptiness of space stretched in all directions. The strike team's ships, sleek and silent, entered the Council outpost's orbital zone, moving with deadly precision. The mission was straightforward: infiltrate, disable the communication relay, and leave before reinforcements could respond. In the cockpit of the lead ship, Lieutenant Rhea focused on her instruments, her pulse steady, even though the pressure was suffocating. The moon was in sight now, desolate, its surface scarred by years of mining and neglect. It was an unassuming target, but beneath its barren exterior, it housed the beating heart of the Council's military communications. All systems are green, Rhea murmured, barely audible over the hum of the engines. Ready to deploy. The team's ships broke formation, each one scattering in different directions as they descended toward the outpost. Their stealth systems engaged, making them virtually invisible to enemy sensors. Rhea gripped the controls tighter, her mind focused on the mission. They had to disable the relay before the Council realized they were here. Approaching target, she said. Ready in 10. The comms crackled. Got your 6, Lieutenant, came the voice of Commander Larkin, the lead pilot on her wing. We'll cover you. Rhea's heart raced as the target grew larger in her view, the gleaming surface of the communication relay coming into sharp focus. It was a towering structure, an intricate mass of tech that thrummed with energy. The moment they hit it, the Council would know they'd been struck, but they would still have the upper hand, for a brief time. She didn't have time to hesitate. Now, she ordered, and in unison, the ships released their payloads, sleek, devastating missiles that struck the relay with pinpoint accuracy. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of space, but the shockwave reverberated through Rhea's ship as alarms screamed in her ear. "Relay disabled," she confirmed, gritting her teeth. "We're pulling back." But as the strike team began to withdraw, a low, ominous hum reverberated through the cockpit. The warning lights flashed. The Council had detected them. "Brace for impact," Rhea shouted. "They know we're here." Back on the flagship, Mara felt a chill sweep over her. The mission had gone well, too well, perhaps. It was a clear victory, but there was something nagging at her, an instinct that told her the Council wouldn't let this go without retribution. "Report." Mara barked as Rhea's voice came through the comms. "We've hit the relay," Rhea reported, her voice strained. "But they're retaliating. We're going to need backup." Mara's fingers moved over the tactical map, rapidly analyzing the incoming data. The Council's response was swift, far too swift. Their fleet was already mobilizing, and reinforcements were already on their way. Earth's fleet was spread thin, their resources stretched to the limit. "Initiate evasive maneuvers," Mara ordered, her mind working in overdrive. "Rhea, get your team out of there, now. We need to move before they get here." But even as she issued the commands, she knew it might already be too late. The Council was relentless. The attack on their outpost would only ignite a firestorm. And Earth would be caught in the center of it. The fleet surged into motion, the ships darting like lightning through the void, avoiding enemy fire as best they could. But no matter how fast they moved, no matter how skilled the pilots, it was clear, the Council was coming. And their anger was palpable. Mara's eyes were fixed on the screen, watching as the incoming fleet began to close in. There was no time to second-guess. No time to doubt their choices. "We fight now," Mara murmured to herself, her voice cold, almost distant. "There's no other way." And then, the first wave of the Council fleet descended upon them, an unstoppable storm of fire and fury. The bridge of the flagship was chaos incarnate. Alarms blared, flashing red lights painting the room in stark contrast to the grim determination on every face. Mara Stryker stood at the center, her hands gripping the console as her mind raced. The Council's reinforcements had arrived in full force, a towering wave of ships that loomed just beyond their reach. The fleet of Earth's survivors was dwindling by the minute, the price of their defiance higher than anyone had anticipated. "Status report." Mara's voice cut through the noise, steady but edged with urgency. "Shields at 40%, Captain," Rhea responded, eyes glued to her screen. "We've lost 2 support ships already. The enemy is closing in fast." Mara's jaw tightened. The Council had come in numbers far beyond their projections. It was the kind of overwhelming force that broke lesser armies, but Earth wasn't like the other species that cowered before such threats. Humanity had always fought for its place in the galaxy, and they would fight to the bitter end now. "Get us into position for the counterstrike," Mara ordered, her eyes flicking to the tactical map. "We need to make them bleed. Every shot counts." Rhea nodded sharply, her fingers moving quickly over the console. "Aye, Captain." Preparing to launch long-range missiles. Mara turned her gaze to the view outside the window. The dark abyss of space stretched infinitely before them, but it had never felt more suffocating. In every direction, the enemy advanced, vessels of unimaginable power, each one a symbol of the Council's dominance over the galaxy. The cold, indifferent metal hulls of their ships gleamed in the distance, a chilling reminder that the Council was not just an empire, but a force that sought to crush all who dared oppose them. But Earth was different. Their fleet was small, their ships battered, but their resolve was unshakable. "We've launched," Rhea said, her voice laced with tension. "Missiles away." The flagship trembled as the missiles shot into the dark void of space, streaking toward their targets. Mara watched the trajectory with bated breath, knowing this was their best chance to slow the enemy's advance. Each missile was a small, fragile hope, a thread of defiance woven into the fabric of an impossible battle. Impact in 5. 4. Rhea counted down. Direct hit. One of their destroyers is going down. Mara's heart skipped a beat. They had scored a victory, but it was small, almost inconsequential compared to the size of the Council's fleet. Still, it was a victory. The comms crackled, breaking through the brief lull of hope. "Captain, we've got an incoming fleet on the starboard side. They've flanked us." Mara's eyes widened. They had only moments before the enemy could unleash a full-scale assault. Time was running out. "Turn us around, full throttle," she commanded, the words almost biting in their intensity. "Get us into evasive maneuvers." The flagship lurched as the engines fired up, the ship groaning under the stress of sudden acceleration. The enemy was closing in fast, and the heavy bombardment began. Mara could feel the vibration of each impact through the soles of her boots, but they had no choice but to push forward. "Rhea," Mara shouted over the blaring alarms, "is the secondary array ready?" "Almost," Rhea responded, sweat beading on her forehead. "We'll need another 30 seconds to power up." 30 seconds is too long. Mara barked, her patience fraying. "If we don't get through this, we're done." "I know." Rhea snapped back. "But if we fire too soon, the backlash will destroy us." Mara clenched her fists. She understood the risk. The secondary array was Earth's trump card, a weapon of last resort, capable of turning the tide of battle, but it came with a cost. If it malfunctioned or they fired too early, the ship would be torn apart in the blast. And yet, there was no choice. "Do it," Mara ordered, her voice a quiet fury. "We can't afford to wait." In the belly of the flagship, the crew scrambled to activate the secondary array. Each soldier, each officer, knew that this was it. There would be no retreat, no surrender. If they failed now, humanity's last stand would be just another forgotten chapter in the galactic history books. Rhea's fingers flew across the console, her face illuminated by the flickering screens. "Powering up, this is it." Outside the viewport, the enemy ships grew closer, their weapons primed for the kill. The first shots rang out, and the flagship rocked violently, metal screaming against the force of the barrage. Yet Rhea's hands remained steady, unwavering in the face of certain destruction. "Now," she shouted. The secondary array flared to life, a blinding pulse of energy erupting from the ship's core. The energy surged outward in a brilliant wave of light, crashing into the advancing Council fleet with the force of 1,000 storms. The effect was immediate. The front line of the Council fleet disintegrated, their ships torn apart by the sheer intensity of the blast. The shockwave spread outward, devastating everything in its path. But as the flagship reeled from the backlash of the shot, Mara's eyes widened in horror. The damage was severe, too severe. The ship's systems flickered and groaned, and she could feel the heavy pull of gravity as the hull strained under the strain of the blast. "Captain," Rhea's voice was barely audible now, weak from the toll the ship had taken. We're not going to make it." Mara's heart pounded in her chest. They had done it. They had struck a blow, a lasting one, against the Council. But at what cost? The flagship was crippled, and the crew, their fate hung by a thread. But Mara's face was set, resolute. "No retreat," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. "We fight until the end." The flagship was broken, its engines sputtering in the void of space, but Mara knew one thing for certain: Earth would not go down without making its mark on the galaxy. And if this was to be their final stand, they would make it count.